joined by very patient Labour leaders, and anybody that knows these three great Labour leaders knows they are not renowned for their patience, but they've been waiting for us to catch up with the programme here at the Big Irish Echo Campfire. I want to thank Kathy Reinhold from the Irish Railroad Workers Museum in Baltimore. It's in a very tough part of Baltimore where the Irish Railroad workers are celebrated, they're remembered. It's an educational project and it's absolutely welcoming and very engaged with its local community as well. Kathy, so thank you for being the chair for this session. It's important that I say hello to that great son of Belfast, Robbie Hunter. He is from Sailortown. I know we had Terry George earlier, Robbie, who says he's from Short Strand and the Market and other places, but Sailortown is the heart of the road. It's the centre of the Belfast. It's where the best people came from, the toughest people, hardest people, and they were also the only people in Belfast who ever saw the world and came back, because they're great seafaring people. So we're very proud of Robbie Hunter. He heads up a trade union, a labour organisation, the California Trades Council, the Construction Trades Council of California. It's hard to say, Robbie, which has almost 500,000 members. Mike Monaghan from IBEW in Boston is a great backer of everything that is progressive and good in the city of Boston. The amount of building going on in Boston is inspirational, and it's all being led by Labour. And of course, Deirdre Feerick in New York is someone who fights like hell for the working man and the working woman. So Kathy, thank you for waiting, folks. Kathy, over to you and good luck. Thank you. She's muted. So Kathy, we need to take...
Okay, thank you. Sorry. It's my pleasure to lead this discussion of coming back stronger and better with Labour at the helm. Martine's already discussed who the participants are, so we'll just get into our discussion. We're going to start our discussion today with this question. Because of the pandemic, our whole concept of who is a key worker has changed during the pandemic and moved beyond doctors, nurses, and first responders. Who do you believe key workers are today, and how can labor unions ensure they get the wages and benefits a key worker deserves? Anyone can start.
Well, Catherine, I guess I will. If talking
Okay.
key workers, especially with the storms. Just recently, we had this hurricane there went through Connecticut. We know what's going on in New Orleans. I'm down in Louisiana and Texas. So we found our line workers were essential, certainly when the power goes out in the summertime with high temperatures and no air conditioning and electricity for refrigerators. And so certainly the medical people are essential, no doubt, but the people out on working the utilities, whether it be gas or electricity, we feel are obviously essential.
And how can we ensure that they are going to get the wages and benefits a key worker deserves?
Well, through collective bargaining, we were very clear from the leadership of Washington to not use a pandemic or any crisis to kind of extort or some way to say we're not going to work unless we get extra money. A lot of the employers, our employers, were offering kind of hazard pay in a sense to get people to work because there were many people that were concerned and didn't want to go to work because of their loved ones at home and etc. But through collective bargaining, I think they'll get to yes, where both sides are not happy, which means it was probably a successful contract.
Okay.
I would agree with everything that he just said. So that's
Okay.
And that also, I think that if there's anything that the pandemic has done, it has made it clear who we need, and that the individuals that we need, in addition to the line workers and the doctors and the medical professionals, it's food production, it's grocery, it's transportation, that we move the essential workers to make sure that they get where they're needed. And I think that there really has been an assessment by regular, everyday people that we're really recognizing and appreciating the work that is done on a regular basis. in ways that weren't necessarily recognized before. And I think that during this time, people really have appreciated that no matter what the difficulty, people have gotten to work and shown up and really shown up for their neighbors and each other. And I think that's really important. And if there's any blessing to be found, that's it.
Thank you. Robbie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the pandemic has hit everybody in different ways. And Governor Newsom here in California, we sat down with him, and the water treatment plants where all the sewage go to, that's our people working out there. We all got to flush a toilet, and pandemic or none. The power plants where the IBEW, Mike Monahan, that's our people maintaining, building the hospitals, the generators, the backup systems is our people. So we stayed on the job. The 450,000 construction workers we represent, we were able to maintain social distancing, keeping them working so that they could, keep services going and keep the economy going. The discussion that we had with the governor here was we could put 500,000 workers on this $600 a week, or we can keep them safely working on the job, driving the economy, preserving the resources for the people that cannot work like us in the open, separately on job sites. So, the construction workforce really is essential to keep roads and bridges and our infrastructure moving. And we feel like we've done very well. And we've been able to protect our workers with training, because we train not to fall off a skyscraper. We train not to work in tunnels under the ocean, pressurized, and we were done in mines. So we simply applied our training to this, and we're able to keep everybody working. So that's how we did it.
Okay, do you all agree that collective bargaining is going to be the key for wages?
Well, I'm going to jump in on that one again. It's the only conditions that working people get decent wages. And this comes out, I relate directly to Ireland with boycott, where the workers got together and said, we will not work for someone that treats us less than this. The foundation of trade unionism, I believe, the Irish, a lot of other nations had a ruling class that was from them. We had a ruling class from across the ocean, so we bind ourselves together in a common cause of, if we stick together, we can get a fair shake. And collective bargaining is the only way that particularly blue-collar workers can get a fair shake.
Okay.
Robbie
All
is
right.
100% correct. We had many cases around the country that were workplaces that were not union, they were not organized, and they banded together, and they didn't maybe collectively bargain. I guess they did collectively bargain, where they demanded to have PPE equipment, et cetera. And so that is definitely, I think, the way of the future with these types of pandemics, et cetera, for workers to be treated correctly and safely. And I'm going to add, while I can, Robbie is much too modest. He's by far the only building tradesperson in the country that was able to keep construction going safely. In our business, we work off hard bids. And if you look at a crane in the air, those cranes cost about $20,000 a week. And if you shut a construction site down for a month or so, there's a good chance that crane company is not going to let that contractor off the hook, and contractors go out of business. So he deserves an awful lot of credit for what he did in California.
Thank you. All right, now let's look at the theme of the campfire. The theme is coming back stronger and better. Do you believe that we are at a tipping point for this economy, which it's commonly accepted hasn't served working people well for the past 4 decades? And if so, what can change, or what will change in the time ahead? Are we at a tipping point?
We've been at a tipping point. I think, if anything, I think it's starting to get better. And it wasn't a pandemic that brought it on, Occupy Wall Street, and there's been this underground movement for some time. Robbie's again closer to it. How California was able to people that work for Uber are not independent contractors, and so this thing has been percolating for a while, and it's people I think are starting to figure out that the I generation, even though we're in the middle of an I generation, but collectivity is definitely needed to improve your life and working conditions, etc.
Deidre, what do you think?
To me, right? You said Deirdre, right? I think that I agree that I think this is an opportunity. When people talk about the 80s and they talk about, Wall Street and everything else, it was the decimation of the airline industry. We had the mass firing of air traffic controllers. There were some really ugly things that went on. And it was the trickle-down economics, economics policies, they just meant crumbs on the floor. And then labor wasn't getting to the table like they needed to. And I feel like labor's at the table now. And when we're going to rebuild and we're going to plan for better cities and better country and get American businesses up and running, because yes, America is business, we're going to be there and we're going to work together to try and make things better, but we're not going to sacrifice the health and safety of our memberships. And I think that's what's important. And I think we stand together across different labor unions. And I think that we are united in that.
Okay. Robbie, do you have anything to add? Did you hear me?
You're muted, Robbie. You're muted.
Pretty hard to mute me, but I did it. And so, I came to America in 1978. I came into New York. I was 21 years old, but, I worked my way across America and ended up in California. And I saw workers and families and kids. And through the years, I've seen, an awful lot of it. How many kids end up in state prisons because they were raised in a household, nobody could help them with their homework. They spoke Spanish. The grandmother raised them. Kids in the foster care. Kids that never stood. They didn't have an Uncle Joe that was a plumber or an electrician. They could say, "Hey, kid, you're coming down here, and we're going to sign you up." And we have in California. We have 68,300 apprentices. We negotiated language to give preference to kids from the foster care system, the emancipated youth, reentry program. We have 15,000 that came out of the reentry programs in the prisons. I just spoke in Folsom Women's Prison, 90 women are reentry. These things only happen if we make them happen. And the changes only happen when we convince the majority of the people around us that it's up to us to raise up the level. Because when you lift the boat of working people, you're lifting everybody's boat. You're lifting a gay kid. You're lifting every family up with it, and that's our job, and that's what we try to do. So the change is things getting better, and they are getting better. But it's, if you blink, it goes away, and we got to work at it every day.
Thank you. All right, the last one that we're going to look at is the American labor movement, through its generosity, has made possible the opening of the first center honoring rising leader James Connolly in Belfast, Ireland. Do you think we do enough to honor the Irish American labor heritage in this country? And if not, what more can we do to ensure we learn from our past? Anybody?
Well, let me see. Am I live? Yep. I was there at the ribbon cutting for the Connolly Labor Center. And, James Connolly, when I was a kid, my grandfather used to say, "James Connolly slept on that sofa." And I'd think, "Oh, God, I'm going to hear this again." But if I would sit and pay attention, maybe he'd give me a shilling. And so I'd perk up and look, and we'd walk by a building in the docks, and he would say, "You see that building? That was James Connolly's first headquarters." And, you'd go into houses as a kid, and it would be the Sacred Heart picture over here, and there'd be a little picture of James Connolly by the door. and they said he and Winifred Carney, a women's suffragette, the women in the mills and the child labor and the workers. Connolly spoke in Belfast to a mass strike crowd, and he looked at the man and he told them, he said, "You're working 18 hours a day. They're cheating you on your wages. Your children are hungry." He says, "You're a slave." He says, "But when you go home and you see your wife and your kids, they're the slave of a slave. And you need to treat women and stand up for women, and they got to be your partners." And as they said, when they give women the vote, they should have took it away from the men. So that's the type of person James Connolly was.
Okay. Mike, do you think we do enough?
Well, every city is, even though Boston's known for being extremely Irish, we have a high population of a lot of Europeans and different types of trades. Certain, whether it be Italian in the brick trades or the stone trades. And my local union is probably is majority Irish, but I'm not sure I don't know if anybody's looking for that. The Irish, for some reason, the thick-headed, they're always ones that seem to want to step forward. When they see something, they have to step forward. That's probably why there's so many Irish that are leaders of labor organizations, because they don't sit back. They have to step forward for better or worse and suffer an awful lot for it. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a need or a desire to recognize Irish leaders, because there's as many Italian, Polish, depends on the trade. But certainly Boston has an awful lot of Irish labor leaders over the hundred so years. I'm my mother's first generation American, but I'm fourth generation labor leader within my union. My great-grandfather, grandfather, my father, and myself all held positions that I did as business manager. So we have the history, obviously, within our local union.
Okay, thanks.
And if I would add, I would just add that, I don't necessarily think that the honoring the Irish American labor heritage is going to be in plaques and statues. It's going to be people like Mike and Robbie, who are exactly the type of people who are, when they see a wrong, they make it right, they make it better. The fact that Robbie just talked about how, Connolly was dedicated to organizing women long before it was considered something that people really looked at. When we look at the Irish American leaders that are in New York or throughout the country, you also see a kindred spirit with the fight for justice, and that we had labor unions who were desegregated long before the courts figured it out. And I think that is the legacy that should be replicated, and that we see it in all other ethnicities also. But that's really what I think our legacy should be, and that's what we should honor, is that there really was an attempt to make things right. And probably because, yes, maybe they were a little thick-headed, because if they thought something was wrong, they didn't see why it couldn't be right. And that, I think, is maybe an attribute that we can also honor. And we can also recognize it in other ethnicities also.
Deidre just touched on something that is extremely important, and we as organized labor just think of it as being normal, but it wasn't. The IBW goes back to the early 1890s, and women have always been paid exactly the same as men in organized labor, and could always vote on a contract, could always elect their leadership long before they had the right to vote in elections. And we're still talking about glass ceilings today. In the early 1890s, women could vote, and women got paid the same. And it's a story that's not told enough. And even with race, in my local union, a charter member is someone who starts the union. And there's 13 people, and one of the people on that charter is a guy named Theo Gould. And Theo Gould was an African American. He's on the charter of Local 103, my local union. He got elected treasurer of Local 103 for 38 straight years. Nobody beat him, and he was an African American in a time period that we I wasn't there, but we can read that racism existed more, I think people believe. We had different water fountains, right? But that fella got elected for 38 straight years in a mainly white male building trades electricians union. So getting involved, being good at your trade, etc. People recognize it, but same pay and being able to vote is a story that's never told, not told enough anyway, I think.
Agreed.
Okay, any final thoughts about labor and where we're going? Robbie, I know you have something to say.
No, get her. It's done your bit. You've done your bit.
Muted again, Robbie.
Well,
You muted, Robbie.
Robbie Hunter, you've had your say. Kathy, that's fantastic. Kathy in Baltimore, Kathy, thanks a million. Deirdre, the union that moves New York, the IBEW, the union that builds Boston, and Robbie, they say in a time of pandemic, I give you my heart, so I give you my heart. Look forward to seeing you back in Belfast. Thanks for all you are all doing to build back better, stronger in the time ahead. Thank you, Kathy. Good luck, folks. Thank you.